Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me this week are Jeff Branke and Anna Wells. We each have more than 15 years of experience covering the manufacturing industry. Every week, we take the 5 most popular stories on our websites and discuss the implications they have on the industry going forward. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. Finally, if you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. We're also live every Friday, so make sure to subscribe to @IEN Magazine on YouTube to make sure you get a notification and you can join us live. Anna, how you doing this week?
Doing fine, thanks. How are you?
I am pumped. You know, we're doing it like right in the mid-afternoon. We wanted to get out a little bit earlier, but not as early as last week because we're short-staffed. It's not my fault. We're short-staffed.
It's definitely not your fault.
Definitely not my fault.
You didn't drive people towards vacation? They just needed to get away? It wasn't you?
You know, they need to get away from me, but I didn't drive them, you know?
Okay, so
it's a complicated dance. How you doing this week, Joe?
I am great, man.
Very good. All right, well, before we get started, we have a word from our new sponsor, Red Zone.
Manufacturers are facing extraordinary challenges today. With labor shortages, supply chain disruptions, and a changing workforce, complex industrial technology doesn't cut it on the front line. What's needed is a new way of working that will not only meet throughput goals, but change the shop floor culture to one of winning, where every worker feels they play a part in achieving the company's goals for success. What's needed is Red Zone, the connected workforce solution.
And we're back. Red Zone's connected workforce software solution enables manufacturers to empower frontline teams in production, maintenance, and quality to contribute their full potential and achieve company goals around productivity and throughput. Red Zone software enables manufacturers, big and small, to boost their plant's productivity, increase employee engagement, and lower turnover. Anna, those are all good things.
All good things.
Yeah, positive, Jeff. Very positive.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's jump into our first story this week. Samsung could build 11 chip plants in Texas. Everything is bigger in Texas, including Samsung's plans for the Lone Star State. The company recently filed documents seeking tax breaks on 11 potential chip plants that would cost more than $190 billion. The South Korean company already has a chip factory in Texas and is currently building another one. The new plants would cost between $12 billion and $23 billion each and create some 900 new jobs each. Nothing is set in stone, and these applications are part of a long-term planning process. Jeff, I mean, Samsung was definitely going big or going home with this one.
Yeah, pretty interesting that they'd come out. And I don't think it's coincidental. This came out within days of the passing of the big CHIPS bill that came out in support of potentially trying to get more chip manufacturing here in the U.S., something like $50 billion to try to lure and attract more of that manufacturing here. I think it was a smart move by Samsung. Really, when you think about it, they've already made a commitment for one of them. They're just kind of putting their name out there, right, saying, hey, we're, like you always say when we're rounding third base in softball, think about it.
Think about it.
Think about it. You know, we're here. I think the fact that they are a South Korean country also kind of gives them a leg up. I think a lot of some of the semiconductor folks coming from Taiwan and other places where there isn't as much of a, where there is a bit of a political issue potentially, also potentially gives them a leg up. Again, I think it was just a smart move by them. They've already got the one they're doing in Texas saying, hey, we're out here too. That $50 billion, you know, we're thinking about 190. So if you want to send some of that our way, maybe they can get a bigger chunk of that by being one of the first to the party, so to speak.
Yes, the flood of free money is coming, and everyone's got a bucket out. Anna, your thoughts on Samsung's, let's say, ambitious plans that would, you know, just bring just about 9,900 new employees online in Texas. Easy.
You just put a vision in my head of like executives from major companies in one of those wind machines with all the dollars.
Oh yeah, they were
like grabbing. That's what I picture is happening right now.
That is what's happening now, metaphorically.
Metaphorically.
Yeah.
Yeah, to me, this is a little bit of a weird scenario because it is so speculative. Like Samsung said that they actually don't have any specific plans, as you mentioned. But it sounds like obviously they're trying to get in front of a deadline for this state-run program called Chapter 313 that deals with property tax incentives. So I get that that stuff kind of helps them evaluate viability. But you do wonder when a company puts the cart before the horse, so to speak, you know, like in this case, maybe they feel a bit forced to in order to leverage this incentives program. So I'm not saying anything about Samsung, but I do think it could start a little bit of a bidding war. That we've seen this in so many cases, right, where multiple states come in, they come to the table to try to outdo one another. And in my opinion, and we've discussed this before, I think that kind of stuff might change the discussion around due diligence for these manufacturers who get these sweetheart deals and then they barely have any skin in the game, and then they're more tempted maybe to roll the dice and see what happens. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I'm not saying that that's the case here necessarily, but we do know there's a market for U.S. chip production, so obviously there's like, you know, an incentive to do this anyway, as well as you mentioned, some federal government help coming down the line here. But I also wouldn't say it's out of the question that the companies that can take advantage of these motivated, like economic lifelines, do so, and then a few years down the road, maybe we have an oversupply. We don't know. I mean, that certainly could happen here. We've seen it happen in so many other cases. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out and if other states get on board to try to push Samsung in one direction or the other. 11 chip plants seems like a lot for Texas.
Yeah.
11 more chip plants, but
no. Talking about due diligence on the manufacturer's part, I think you start hearing numbers like $200 billion, and the due diligence on the state's part also kind of falls alongside the road.
People get stars in their eyes. Yeah, I agree.
So it's, as you said, Chapter 313 is one of Texas's most valuable tax incentives programs, and it's going to expire at the end of December 31st, 2022. And it reduces school district property taxes for capital-intensive facilities to try and, attract this type of economic development. Some have argued that the government should not spend billions to subsidize the semiconductor industry, an industry that, quote, does not need any additional government handouts, talking about the CHIPS program now. Yeah. And, I mean, a lot of times it seems like the government has a tough time picking winners and losers. And I've always, I don't know, I kind of feel like I'm on the fence with this because I understand the need for the incentives, right? Because we got to be competitive. But I also think that it's easy for the government to go a little too far trying to pick a winner. And, that by the time that happens, there's so much skin in the game that, when things go bad, everyone's kind of like tied to it. They can't bail.
No, I totally agree. It is a tough one because you want to be competitive. You want to get, this whole, everything with the pandemic, we want our supply chains closer to home. Yeah. And we're so dependent on these chips. It's kind of interesting, looking at the different market segments, I think there's obviously areas that we are become very well versed in terms of the shortages, like automotive. And obviously computing, mobile devices, all of that. What's kind of interesting looking at some of the numbers, and this is actually from IEEE, the industrial sector actually spends more annually on sourcing chips than automotive. So when you look at all the stuff that we need for automated equipment within our factories and within manufacturing, that's a big need there as well. And that's where I do get excited when we look at some of these chip manufacturers coming here, providing incentives for them, because it will help all facets of manufacturing, including the actual stuff we need to make the stuff. So I get it there. It is scary when you're looking at this big of a pie, though, to potentially divvy out to people.
Well, and it's just, in good American tradition to, do something about a year and a half too late, but really come over the top to overcompensate.
Well, to have unreasonable expectations, and I think we've talked about this a number of times. It's great to build these plants. This isn't going to have an impact for 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah. All right. Our next most popular story this week. Ukraine deploys homegrown machine gun mounted robot. That sounded like a Mad Lib. All right. The GNOM, or GNOME, as I'm going to call it, is an uncrewed ground vehicle made by Ukraine-based Termerland. The 2-square-foot remote-controlled unit is being used to support ground troops in the war with Russia. One of the GNOME's key features is that it's not as susceptible to the frequency jamming countermeasures that have impacted drone use during the Russian invasion. It has a spool of wear-resistant fiber optic cable that it spools out behind it, enabling more reliable control and communication. The 110-pound GNOME can deliver ammunition and supplies and collect and share data using a camera mounted to a telescopic mast that can record images from up to 3 miles away. The application that's getting the most attention is that it has a 7.62-millimeter machine gun mounted to it. While remote controls for guns or wheeled devices are not new, the combination of the two is in a combat environment is what's innovative here. The biggest concern for military leaders is how to use these armed UGVs alongside troops. They also need to dedicate personnel to operate the device and properly fire the weapon. Ideally, the lessons learned in Ukraine can one day provide support for law enforcement, disaster relief, and transporting medical supplies. And Jeff, that's what I'm holding on to, is what it can become and not how it's being used currently in war.
Well, and it's interesting because when you look at, is it Temerland? Is that how we're saying that?
Or Termerland? Oh, it's Temerland.
Temerland,
yeah,
okay. The Ukrainian manufacturer of these things. If you look at their site and the different offerings that they have, they're not really meant to, their first application is not for armed support, okay, to provide fire support. So that's what they've done. Obviously, desperate times create desperate measures, and this is what we're seeing. From a purely tactical perspective, it will be interesting to see how this sort of plays out, because obviously infantry troops don't move in straight lines across open fields. So you're maneuvering these units through some interesting terrain, especially if you're in an urban environment, a lot of urban warfare going on right now, and making sure there's no friendly fire casualties. In trying to remove people from the combat zone, you're not creating more potentially with somebody operating a machine gun. They don't have a clear field of vision, of sight of where it's firing. So I would think from a tactical perspective where these could be great is in terms of like setting up for an ambush or putting a gun in place and being able to fire it that way. These guns, typically you're looking at about a 25-pound gun with about 10 to 15 pounds of ammo. So if you don't have to carry that, that is great. Yeah. And that sort of leads into what you were talking about there in terms of what these were initially created for. Yeah. They're really meant as transport units. They're really meant, actually, one of the biggest applications for them is for communication purposes, to almost serve as if you were like a satellite hotspot.
Oh, yeah.
That's one of the main things that they were developed for.
Like reconnaissance?
Right.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And so you can see with even one of these units, it's kind of funny, looking at the Scorpio 2 specifically, and it's got a big turreted machine gun on the front of it. It looks like something out of, I don't know, Transformers or something. Yeah. It's actually one of the applications is for tilling fields.
Oh, really?
I mean, so you can
That's not the vibe you get when you see the Scorpio 2.
Not at all. It's not an agricultural vehicle by looking at it, but that's where these came from. And like you alluded to, hopefully that's where we can get back to.
Yeah. Is it tethered?
It's either.
Oh, okay.
So it can be tethered with that fiber optic cable. That's why it's good for gathering intelligence and doing reconnaissance work. It's got that great camera on it. Yeah. The telescoping turret. So that's what it can do that, but they also have autonomous functionality as well.
Okay. That was the only sticking point for me is I was like, oh, well, if it's tethered, and it's probably not going to be able to go very far. And then when you were talking about additional uses for it, like transporting medical supplies during a disaster, I'm like, well, you're not going to get over anything if it's tethered. But I guess if it can operate, without that, that'd be much better. What were your thoughts on the Gnome?
I think Jeff covered a lot of the high points on the Gnome, as did you. Safety being a big one. And I think it's important to be clear, too, as we talk about this, is, when you see, like, terms like machine gun mounted robot, my mind jumps to, like, autonomous and fears of, like, this being autonomously fired and, all the ramifications of that. That's not the case here. This is a remote gunner, right, who's taking the shot. So it's not easily getting out of your control. It's not one of those scary military developments where you have to be worried about it getting into the wrong hands and what it could mean for the future. And in fact, I think like almost more controllable than a drone potentially. And it has those benefits. In addition that the drones face challenges with like those jammers and the radio frequencies, this doesn't have to deal with that. So it's not detected and targeted in the same way. I think, it's generating a lot of headlines for the machine gun part, but as you mentioned, really the key applications here could be just delivering those supplies to the front lines, keeping soldiers out of harm's way who don't need to physically be doing that. Like, that's a really important development, I think, for Ukraine.
Well, it's a really durable unit. It's 110 pounds. It's got the all-terrain tires on it, all that kind of stuff. So disaster relief, all of those types of applications too. And ideally, if it can survive a war zone, you'd think they'd be able to shore it up from a product development perspective. To handle almost anything. Yeah,
innovation from wartime has been consistent with the the entire time of man. But I still feel for the troop who's behind the wheel of that thing, because that has to just be an emotionally taxing job to be the person remotely controlling that gun. All right. Well, our next most popular story this week: Chipotle enlists hidden robot army to build burritos. Chipotle wants to have 7,000 restaurants in North America. Right now, there are 3,008. To more than double, the company is adding robots to the workforce. This week, the company invested in Hyphen, a California-based company that makes food production robotics. Hyphen's first product is the Make Line. an automated system that can handle all digital orders under the counter, out of the view of customers, while staff continue to assemble in-house orders on top of the counter. Hyphen features thousands of sensors and uses AI to make sure orders are put together correctly. The machine also prints the customer's names and orders directly on the packaging, and for Hyphen, the Chipotle investment will allow it to accelerate hiring plans, pouring money into R&D and scaling operations. Anna, as long as your burrito's right, do you mind if it was made by man or machine?
What are the odds this robot's going to get your name right on the package?
It's going to take it. I mean, I think there's a lot of fun to be had here.
Yeah.
Because, I have a lot of fun with the names that you put on that order for carryout.
Yeah.
And I mean...
Oh, you're that guy?
Of course I'm that guy. You know me. And I just, especially once it starts burning the names onto the paper.
Seymour Butts. Your burrito's ready?
That's going to be the first order. They're going to have to hold it up we've done it. Hyphen has made the first order for Seymour Butts.
Seymour Butts.
Yeah, it's a classic.
Beep boop. The robots don't do that, I don't think. I don't know. This is an interesting story because I feel like there was a lot of fear and concern around robots and applications that were coming from manufacturing, and this idea that they were going to displace a ton of workers in manufacturing. If you look at the data, that hasn't really happened in manufacturing. There's been a lot of development, I think, of robotics, automation, cobots in manufacturing, but more like working alongside of existing personnel and sort of supplementing that process. But where we have seen robots come in and I think be more of a threat to jobs is in settings like warehouse, grocery, fast food, where the applications might be a little bit more straightforward. Because the reality, I think, in many manufacturing processes is they really are mostly more low volume, a little bit more nuanced than just these repetitive tasks that people have in their minds of what manufacturing is, more value add. But now you see, White Castle's using a robot, from Miso Robotics to flip burgers to drop fryers. Jamba Juice has a robot smoothie maker kiosk at some locations. Panera is using automated coffee making machines that are driven by artificial intelligence. That's just a handful of the applications that we're seeing in fast food. And honestly, there is a need right now when the job market is so uneven and these restaurants are really limited on staffing. They've been struggling to attain a consistent workforce. We've all seen it, walking up to a door and seeing that the hours have changed on a restaurant that used to be open all the time now is cutting back because of workforce issues. So, I think these businesses are clearly seeing that opportunity that if they want to incorporate automation into their operations without a massive backlash that you might have seen a few years back, now is precisely that time, in my opinion. I mean, you can blame it on the worker shortage and never look back. I mean, when this job market shifts, which it inevitably will, this will already be embedded in their process, and we'll look back and we'll talk about that time when jobs were permanently eliminated during this economic boom that we saw post-COVID. I truly believe that will happen.
Oh, yeah.
And, you saw, if this happened a couple years back, people were angry, I think, when even some of those ordering kiosks started to show up at Subway and McDonald's and stuff. What's happening to jobs? People were mad about self-checkout. But now it's if you want to go to Walmart or whatever and get your product through, they have 1-2 checkers on because that's all they can do. They have, our local Walmart by our office, they've implemented probably 10 times the number of self-checkout stations as they had before the pandemic, and I think that it's related to workers, but it's also, like I said, a good time for them to do that without facing a lot of revolt, I guess, from the general public saying that they're cutting jobs in favor of automation.
Yeah. You did, I like that you mentioned the White Castle robot, which is called Flippy.
Flippy,
from Miso Robotics. And what I was shocked about is that's already in 300 White Castles, flipping burgers and dropping fries. Because Chipotle, I learned about Flippy because Chipotle actually recently unveiled Chippy.
Yeah.
Yeah, the robot from also from Miso that's making tortilla chips and is part of a pilot program right now. So I thought, maybe it was a little bit more green, but then to see that they're in 300 locations in White Castle, that's incredible.
The fact that there are 300 White Castles at all is what I'm surprised by.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
That's your thing?
I mean, I don't go to. You see so many of them. I guess I assumed there was at least that many.
Maybe they're white noise to me at this point. I just.
I mean.
Sorry.
I went to a White Castle once after the movie came out, and I was like, I don't get it.
Pretty underwhelming.
Yeah.
Square burger,
like,
all right.
It's all about the burger, and this is trash. Jeff, your thoughts on robots in the kitchen?
Yeah, I think you guys have already mentioned. I think there's definitely a cobot vibe here,
yeah.
The term that we're in the industrial sector with. So I think it's cool to see this coming in, and I think some of the other applications this could lead to as well. If you look at pharmacy, you'd think this type of thing could also fit pretty well there. Those folks are super understaffed right now. I mean, getting a prescription filled takes a while now. When you go there, you actually feel bad for them. I mean, they're just swamps back there running around. Couple things I like just about the setup that Hyphen has here. It's got a modular design, so you can kind of plug and play with however much you need. Thinking down the road, you could also see like in schools or cafeteria environments having this type of setup. That could be huge in terms of saving time, getting kids fed sooner. I don't know, maybe cutting personnel out a little bit if you didn't need them or having trouble finding them.
Yeah.
The other thing I like that was kind of cool is they use a robotics as a service pricing model, so there's no huge upfront cost associated with it, which I think is pretty smart. I mean, if you're trying to get it in here, and they charge based on the number of meals that the robot actually prepares and serves.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, I think it's really smart in a number of different ways. Like I said, great design. It meets all the codes, obviously, for food service. It's stainless steel, easy to clean, all that good stuff. So product development perspective, I think they nailed it. It'll be interesting to see, just from an integration perspective, how far this goes and how far, to Anna's point, people feel comfortable with it.
Yeah.
One of the things that I started thinking about, and I'll ask you guys, and maybe I'm being overly optimistic here when it comes to manufacturing, but if potentially there are fewer jobs in fast food, food service, that type of thing, with Starbucks and other places like Chipotle, will that potentially drive people more towards looking at manufacturing jobs? Because if they don't have, it might be more palatable, if you will, if there's still some of those stigmas involved with manufacturing, being I've got to go to a factory, I got to work on the plant floor, it's hot, it's dirty, which we know is not the case. As opposed to sitting in air conditioning making coffee. Maybe some of these developments could actually help quell some of the workforce demands in other areas like manufacturing. I don't know.
No, absolutely. I mean, right now we see that there's a finite pool of labor out there that's willing to work. And, if automation comes in and removes a lot of those jobs from fast food, I think manufacturing would be, if a lot of those jobs haven't been removed in manufacturing as a result of automation, I think manufacturing would be a good fit. How about you, Anna?
Well, yes, potentially. I also find it interesting that when Walmart started incorporating a lot of robots into its stores for inventory purposes and cleaning applications and things like that, that there was some articles that came out after that expressed some discontent on behalf of Walmart's employees about working alongside of robots. Not just that it was creepy, I guess, but also that it was sort of demoralizing. And so I don't know if in these applications where you don't maybe expect a robot to be there, and when you took that job you weren't expecting that and now it's there, if that will have any impact on those types of scenarios as well as they did in retail.
No, I think, to your point earlier about the screens, the ordering screens at like McDonald's and Subway, I think we've already begun to see the impact those have, because when you go into the restaurant to order on a screen, like they almost laugh at you if you walk up to the counter, and they'll kind of walk away. Just like the screen, the screen. And so, as a result, if that is my new experience now in the restaurant, I would much rather it just be robots back there. I don't know. It's just, I think this is the future. Not just, we always talk about lights, trying to attain lights out manufacturing, but I think that we'll likely see lights out fast food faster.
That sounds awful, though.
It does.
You don't
but
think having
it doesn't.
Any humans in there to figure out what's going on when you have a problem? You think a robot's going to solve your problem?
I think it could. I mean, we talked a couple weeks ago about actually I was the one least comfortable about ordering a burger off essentially a red box. But talking to people in the industry, they've been working towards this for a long time, where essentially it would be a shipping container that would start making the pizza in the back, and in the front the pizza as you ordered it would just come out. And I mean, how often are the humans there to actually fix your problem?
See, I think you still will need human beings there for a quality control perspective in case something goes sideways. I don't think you could ever be completely lights out, but I like the automated ordering thing.
Yeah.
One of the places we always go is Culver's.
Mm-hmm.
Man, you know what the lines are in that place trying to get stuff, and it's not complicated stuff. If I could step up to a kiosk and punch it in and go sit down and wait for it to be delivered, that would be better.
Yeah.
No disrespect to the Culver's workers out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, quality control perspective, it has been my experience going to restaurants and fast food places in the last 6 months to a year that they don't ever get it right.
Okay, but David, if there's not a human in McDonald's, there is going to be ketchup everywhere. You don't think that people are going to do horrible things to that restaurant?
Oh, no, I'm talking about not even being in the restaurant. Oh, you're talking about the cleanliness of the restaurant?
And just people will just be like, oh, then when I order, people throw their food on the ground. There has to be some level of humanity there. Otherwise,
the little burger Roomba is going to come and get it. That's the noise a burger Roomba makes.
no one's going to be respectful.
They might just need some stray dogs in there.
Of the robot.
I also have to say, though, David, you are absolutely cursed because I think you have more horror stories from these types of businesses than anybody else.
Any business.
But it's not. I mean, it's not a horror. It's not a horror story. I'm just saying that whenever I go to Taco Bell, because the one thing my kids will reliably eat are twists and a soft taco with just meat and cheese. And so I order those two things first now because they are at the top of the receipts. Those are the first two things you have to check off. Yesterday, I ordered twists, soft tacos, and then let's say 19 to 20 more things. But what did they forget? And during COVID, they would seal the bag with that sticker, that massive sticker. And so you're had to rip the top off, no twists, and then you bang on the window. It's please, did you not hear my kids? They chant twists, twists, twists.
Okay, but
until they get it.
You think a robot is gonna hear the chant?
No, I think that a robot will make sure that it's checked everything in the bag, and in the event that the robot missed my twists, I can just say, twists missing, and then it'll just give me another one. Because it'll have such a
David has picked a side in the human-robot war.
Yeah,
and he picked robots.
Positioning himself right now to be their underling. And run things for the robots.
I'll say that they're really nice at Taco Bell. They're very nice, and they're always oh, so sorry. It's every time.
I can't believe you turned your back on us so quickly. The war hasn't even started, and you've already betrayed us.
I know, it's crazy. You I feel like you're anti-job.
I mean,
you're anti-human.
Humans really never had anything going for them, anyways.
We better move on.
We better move on. All right. Our next most popular story this week. Hyundai subsidiary in Alabama accused of employing children. According to a recent Reuters report, a majority-owned unit of Hyundai Motor Company, Smart Alabama, has been employing children as young as 12 years old. The plant produces stamped metal parts and assemblies. Local authorities learned of the plant's practice of employing underage workers after a Guatemalan migrant child went missing in February. The girl, who was 13, had been working at Smart along with her 12 and 15-year-old brothers. The siblings are part of a large group of underage workers who have worked for the supplier over the last few years. At the facility, which has a history of safety violations, children workers were foregoing school to work longer shifts. Now, Smart denied the allegations, and Hyundai said it, quote, does not tolerate illegal employment practices at any Hyundai entity. Many of the minors were hired through recruitment agencies, and one former worker claimed that there were about 50 underage workers across different shifts when he worked there. To make matters worse, local law enforcement who uncovered the underage workers doesn't have jurisdiction to investigate labor law violations. Federal and state law prohibits anyone under the age of 18 to work in metal stamping and pressing plants. And I know this story has a lot to unpack, and none of it's good.
No, we talked about this story a lot in the office, and we cover this industry, right? So we've seen lots of instances of companies skirting regulations in every area, but this was still shocking to me to consider that there were maybe 50 plus kids working in this plant at one point and no one's really saying anything. And I can only assume that that's out of fear of retribution, or maybe because they felt that the families desperately needed this income and that they didn't feel it was their place to speak out. I don't know why, but the reality is that these kids were being exploited. And this is different from helping your parents in their small business after school or having a paper route in the morning. This is more than teaching kids how to be responsible.
Yeah, this is a stamping plant.
This is a stamping plant. They were missing school. They were working in a place that had a history of amputations, safety violations, fines, all kinds of stuff. The children that were called out in this article were described as migrants, which means that they were almost certainly undocumented. So even if Smart was using a staffing agency, which it sounds like they were, Hyundai and Smart, I think, have a responsibility to keep their head up about this, because you can't tell me that people didn't know. That's hard for me to believe. And if Smart, when Smart denied the allegations, they said that they didn't knowingly hire anyone who was not of legal age to work in their factory. You need to know. You need to have that paperwork in place. You can't rely on a staffing agency to just say that this is okay. And for whatever reason, I don't know what the relationship was there or the culture there, that the staffing agency thought that this was something that they could get away with. To me, that means that the people at Smart or at Hyundai were turning a blind eye to it. And to me, I think it's possible that what they'd be fined for this is not enough of a deterrent. And perhaps the Department of Labor needs to beef up their penalties to deter this from happening elsewhere. Because if we look at the job market now, there's lots of worker shortages. If companies are inclined to do this, to address that, I think we might be seeing more of this. And if we're hoping that there's going to be enough PR backlash to be a deterrent in this case, look at this story. Nobody's boycotting Hyundai. No, it was like a blip nationally, honestly, this story.
Yeah, it dropped on a Friday afternoon and kind of went away.
Yeah, and despite these allegations being, to me, jaw-dropping, I don't think it got very much attention at all. And maybe that's because the news cycle right now is full of crazy stuff. We know that. Just there's a lot of horrible, crazy things happening in the world. But for whatever reason, this got overlooked. This cannot continue to happen. This is, just to me, this is just like shocking and horrifying. And somebody at the Department of Labor needs to take some steps to make sure that this isn't happening again.
No, and I agree with Mark Waterman, who is watching us live. He says somebody needs to go to jail. And I think many somebodies need to go to jail, because I understand that you can see a mature 15-year-old and walk past them in a plant and be like, I bet he's 18 or 17, or 18, I guess, if you got to be 18 to work there. But a 12-year-old, there's no way you walk past a 12-year-old in a stamping plant and think, that seems normal. And everyone's complicit. And you talk about fear of retribution. It sounds like there's a greater fear because of deportation. So, you're putting your entire family at risk if you try and be a whistleblower. Jeff, your thoughts on what was happening at Smart?
The answer to all of those things that Anna brought up, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's a 12-year-old kid working in a stamping plant. It's ridiculous. And what made me see red is when you read comments from people who worked in the facility. Okay, Smart's wrong. Way wrong.
Yeah.
People working there knew this was going on.
Yeah.
Did nothing.
Step up.
Step up. Here's the thing. Here's the other thing too. Nobody's going to talk about this or want to say it. The reason this didn't make the news cycle, it's a 12-year-old kid from Guatemala. If this is a white homeless kid from in that area, this is a different story.
Oh yeah.
This was a migrant worker. This was somebody who was undocumented. Well, ship them back. This is over and done. And it's going to continue to happen. Here's another reason it's going to continue to happen. This is straight from the Department of Labor's website. Violators of the child labor provisions are, and this they're talking about the Fair Labor Standards Act, are subject to a civil money penalty of up to $10,000 for each employee who is subject to a violation. Employees who willfully or repeatedly violate the minimum wage or overtime pay requirements are subject to a civil money penalty of up to $1,000 for each violation. $10,000 is the penalty for. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And if you do it again, hey, it's another $1,000.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
There's no teeth here. So shame on this company for not caring.
Yeah.
Shame on these coworkers for not saying anything, and shame on the Department of Labor for being an absolute wuss about trying to enforce this.
Yeah.
That's where everything fell down.
Yeah.
Amen.
Everything fell down everywhere. And Anna, to your point earlier, you can blame nearly everything else on a labor shortage. Not this. This is just not acceptable. And Jeff, to your point, that the coworkers are what probably anger me the most.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times it takes, when something's wrong in a factory, it's the workers who have to do something about it. Until something like a headline like this forces its hand. But I mean, Smart and Hyundai should have come out and said a little bit more than just like, it's not on us. You know, like it's not a staffing agency.
Trying to act like you didn't know. Shame on Hyundai. They had an opportunity here to do the right thing, and they could have gotten praised up and down for finally for seeing something that was wrong and taking action. They chose to do nothing.
Yeah, cut all ties with the recruitment agencies. Like, figure out a way to penalize them. Like, but you know, if you're beholden to them, it's just a slap on the wrist, and hopefully it goes away. The other thing was that, what they're going to do is just pass the buck, which I was surprised they haven't done yet. And hopefully, if it gets a little bit more attention, or maybe somebody at least gets a $10,000 fine instead of probably going
for
to jail.
each incident.
Yeah.
How many of these are you going to be able to prove? These are all illegal immigrants. They're gone.
Yeah. Man, it's just a very frustrating story all around, and hopefully something is done. Where was it? It was Alabama, right?
Yeah.
Montgomery, Alabama. That was the other thing that was troubling to me, is that trying to just say that it was, you know, a subsidiary and kind of like trying to put a little distance there. Didn't the story say that they're like essentially next to each other?
Well, it's owned by Hyundai. It's a
But I mean,
like a majority-owned subsidiary of Hyundai, so it's a Hyundai company.
Yeah, it's a Hyundai company, but like you could even a little bit of ignorance if it was on the other side of the nation, you know. But
sure, yeah.
if it's on the same campus,
Or if it's a minor component. These are the frames.
yeah.
These are the car. This is the frame of the car.
Yeah, and I mean, these are people that are coming in and out of there every day on this Hyundai campus. I mean, not just the people in the factory, but just like, hey, you guys notice that over at Smart, they have like a lot of bring your kid to work days? Just crazy.
Horrible.
All right, well, we're going to depart a little bit for our most popular story this week and discuss a trash fence. A trash fence that catches a garbage tsunami heading downriver. In part 3 of Ben Munson's Trash Trilogy, he covers the Ocean Cleanup, a nonprofit environmental engineering organization that identified the Rio Motagua in Guatemala as a river that sends an estimated 20,000 metric tons of plastic into the Caribbean Sea every year. This one river is responsible for 2% of the plastic in the oceans. Ocean Cleanup recently developed an 8-meter-tall interceptor trash fence. Designed to contain trash upstream before it can hit the ocean and disperse, the fence uses technology common in avalanche and landslide protection systems. The idea is to catch the trash during flood season and then wait for water levels to recede before moving the garbage pile with excavators. In a video showing the interceptor trash fence in action, a shocking amount of garbage rages down the river before it's trapped by the fence. Now, it's not all good news. The trash fence has failed because the river actually erodes the river base below the fence. But Ocean Cleanup engineers are working to optimize the design and figure out just how many trash fences it'll take to keep all or most of the plastic from making it to the sea. Jeff, Did you see the video of this filthy river?
Man,
it's disgusting.
As hard as the last story was to read and process, that was just as like stomach turning to watch all that just flowing down that river. That was hard. You know, this organization, Ocean Cleanup, I think this is my new favorite charity. I like this, what they're doing here. You see a lot of these organizations that are very good at pointing out the problem and trying to raise awareness, which is important. I'm not trying to downplay that. These folks are not only doing that, they're actually trying to do something.
Yeah, they're engineers.
They've identified that 80% of river plastic or plastic that gets to the ocean comes from about 1,000 different rivers throughout the U.S. So they're trying to implement this type of technology. Now, 1,000 rivers is a lot, but it feels like you can get after that. Like that's something that's palatable. You feel like that's a reasonable goal. So that's what they're doing with this. They've also got some vehicles that they have on the water that are collecting trash, and they're focused on all of these rivers that are contributing, like I said, 80% of this plastic to the ocean. So if we can get behind this, I mean, this is a viable solution. I think what we saw in the video and what we talked about here, it's the thing that leads to the thing, right? It's a great first step. Well, actually, this is the second step. They had one before this. So I was just really impressed. And again, I'm just going to give them a plug. If you're interested in helping them out, it's theoceancleanup.com/donate. And I know I'm going to, because like I said, they've got a viable solution here that is actually going to have a real impact on something that's such a huge, huge issue right now.
Yeah, and to your point, they're trying to get an interceptor trash fence on these 1,000 heaviest polluting rivers. Anna, I thought it was interesting because a lot of times, you know, we talk about the R&D side of engineering, like the stuff that, you know, eventually we're going to see hit the market, or we see stuff that's already in the market. This is something that, you know, they took a real world problem, made a solution, it worked mostly, and they're making tweaks, and hopefully it could be implemented in the near future. Money aside, you know, hopefully.
Right, yeah, I mean, it can be definitely a drag to think about, you know, pollution and the climate crisis and all that stuff every day. It's in our face. And so when you see stuff like this that you feel like can really make a difference, and it's being developed and they're, you know, working out the kinks, like that's exciting. And I think it's a great example of approaching this problem from multiple sides. That's what I like about it, is more of a preventative tool. I mean, we've seen other ocean plastic mitigation efforts that are taking place after it's already there in the ocean, like big nets and boats and things like that pull the stuff from big bodies of water. But obviously there's risk in it being there in the first place, both to, you know, marine life, birds, as well as some of the toxins that leach from those plastics into the water. So if we can identify these major arteries for ocean trash and kind of get ahead of it, that's exciting. That's a really cool product. I'm also going to take this opportunity to make my pitch about plastic. The vast majority of single-use plastic does not get recycled. And if you think this doesn't apply to you because you dutifully throw your plastic in the recycle bin, that's not really what it's about. It's after, you know, many municipalities have kind of had to reduce their budgets related to recycling program capabilities and capacities. Wrong types of plastics get in the wrong areas, and whole bags of recyclables get pitched. I mean, it happens every day. We used to export a lot of our plastic to other countries who would utilize those materials. They don't want our plastic anymore. So there's a big glut between what's being used and our capacity to actually recycle it. And the best thing that we can do is use less single-use plastic. And I'm not coming here from like a high horse. I know that it's inevitable that we have to use plastic because it's everywhere. Everybody uses it to package their goods, so it's, you know, but if you can scale it back, think about what you can do. If it's bringing up your own reusable cup and not buying bottled water, whatever you can do, it does make a difference because there's just so much of it out there. So anyway, try to come back if you can. That's my pitch on plastic.
No, that was I had switched to bringing my own containers for water, stuff like that, just because when we would travel a lot, that was when it really hit me as to like how many water bottles I was buying, you know, one at the airport, one on the plane, in the hotel, and I was just going through a lot. And you know, you start bringing that around. I know that my family is probably annoyed by it because like, oh, here's David and his blue jug again. It's like, I don't want to dirty a dish.
Well, I actually give my kids a lot of credit. I mean, like in the schools and stuff, they've got more access to, like, not bubblers, water dispensing, stuff like that. So they're always carrying carrying around, a water bottle, which is something that just isn't in my brain. You grab a bottle of water or something like that if you're going someplace. So hopefully those paradigm shifts will help. I agree with you 100%, Anna, especially because when you look at single-use plastics, where it's not going to die down and where we would have a very difficult time controlling the use is like medical applications, pharmaceutical applications. You need the durability of plastics there and the chemical resistance, the bacteria resistance and all that. That's what plastics do.
Yeah, but we can cut down everywhere else.
Right.
Keep it in medical.
Right.
One thing about the story is that it was all unlicensed waste dumping, and which obvious. But I just find there to be a shocking lack of waste management in the U.S. and globally. You talk about how things are here in Madison, just in terms of recycling programs getting cut back. We did the story a few months ago on wish cycling, which is a big part of the problem. People recycling things that aren't recyclable, but when we go up north, when we go to the cottage, there's the dump, right? There isn't waste collection. You go to the dump. And I'll use the 4th of July as an example. 4th of July weekend, really busy in the north woods of Wisconsin. Go to the dump after a long weekend. And, I've got bags of garbage and I have bags of recyclable materials, right? And he's just like, the one dump says, recycling's full. Just take it home with you. Just take it home and bring it back. And it's like, I'm not going to leave 10 bags of like recyclables in the garage, until we come back in a month. That is gross. But then you go to the other dump site. He says, just throw it all in the garbage. So it's like, at what point does waste management just need to get better? Get a few more receptacles. Sometimes it's as simple as crushing cans, crush cans so it's not taking up so much space. But I just couldn't believe how logistically flawed waste management still is.
Well, and that's here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, looking at some stats here, the U.S. is actually like the 8th worst contributor to ocean plastics.
Yeah.
The top 5 are in Asia.
Yeah.
Okay. So if it's that bad here.
Yeah.
Imagine what it's like in other places that we really have to also put more resources towards globally.
Yeah.
When you look at, again, those 1,000 rivers, the vast majority we're looking at Africa and Asia for contributing to ocean plastics. So what kind of infrastructure mess are they dealing with there and trying to do?
Totally.
Well, and it's not something that you have to learn. It's like some weird connection that you have with nature where if you pollute, even accidentally, like something flies off the boat or you drop something in the water, you innately feel like you've done something bad. And maybe that's just like a lifelong messaging on pollution.
I don't think that's universal, unfortunately.
I don't know. I feel like these people that are throwing paint cans in the Rio Motagua should or maybe it's just what's always been done. But most importantly, if you guys want to make sure that you catch parts 1 and 2 of Ben Munson's Trash trilogy, he also had the Trash Mountain story in Everett, Washington that we talked about, the powder keg of trash, and he also had the Sexy Talking Trash Can, which tries to entice people to recycle by talking dirty to them.
Yeah, that one got a lot of views.
Yeah. Can't repeat anything that trash can says.
Yeah.
Salacious. Trash can's got a filthy mouth.
How long have you been trying to work that word into the podcast?
Salacious.
Yeah.
I don't know, it just came to me, felt good.
Good.
Yeah.
David, do you think the state of waste management in the U.S. went downhill after Tony Soprano died?
I think it's really up in the air. I think it was inconclusive at the end.
Got it.
All right. Well, before we move on to In Case You Missed It, we have another word from our new sponsor, Red Zone.
Manufacturers are facing extraordinary challenges today. With labor shortages, supply chain disruptions, and a changing workforce, complex industrial technology doesn't cut it on the front line. What's needed is a new way of working that will not only meet throughput goals, but change the shop floor culture to one of winning, where every worker feels they play a part in achieving the company's goals for success. What's needed is Red Zone, the connected workforce solution.
And we're back. And just a reminder that Red Zone's connected workforce software solution enables manufacturers to empower frontline teams in production, maintenance, and quality to contribute their full potential and achieve company goals around productivity and throughput. Red Zone software enables manufacturers, big and small, to boost their plant's productivity, increase employee engagement, and lower turnover. See, Jeff, it still sounds good.
Well done.
All right. Let's move on.
You didn't work salacious in there, though. Talk to Red Zone, see if you can figure something out there.
All right. We'll work on the script. Okay. All right. Let's move on to In Case You Missed It. The stories that maybe weren't as popular on the website, but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward. Anna, what's your In Case You Missed It this week?
So I selected an update on a story that we recently discussed on the podcast, which has to do with the Panasonic deal brokered by the state of Kansas in the town of DeSoto. The company is planning to invest $4 billion in a factory to make batteries for EVs and will employ 4,000 workers in theory. So in exchange for this project, the state has approved taxpayer-funded incentives of $829 million, which we discussed last week. And the interesting thing that we've learned since is there are some details within this deal that were not exactly clear at the beginning when we first reported on it. But the Kansas City Star is saying that the state's economic development package does not require Panasonic to actually create any jobs or offer a certain wage in order to receive the funding that they have been promised. Mm-hmm. There is, however, a stipulation that Panasonic spend at least $1 billion in building its factory in order to receive the incentives, and it must stay for 15 years. Despite this, the lack of job requirements was so unorthodox that some experts were scratching their heads, including Nathan Jensen, who's a government professor at the University of Texas, Austin. He studies these types of economic development incentives. He said that the lack of wage and labor standards was, quote, shocking, and that this is economic development 101. I don't really know what to say besides this lack of specifics. Sort of feels like states are engaging in a race to the bottom. I realize that the company being forced to commit to building that factory, investing $1 billion, staying for 15 years is something. But and I'm going to bring up Foxconn again because it was very close to us here in Wisconsin. But we saw Foxconn set up shop in Wisconsin and employ a handful of people that were described as like pushing brooms around these facilities.
Yeah.
As
barely paid interns.
Barely paid interns just kind of in the building with nothing to do. I don't think this is Panasonic's intention, of course. But if there's a loophole and they need to use it, you know that they will. And in Wisconsin, you know, it was that jobs requirement that allowed the state to largely back out of their commitments to provide all this tax incentive and funding to Foxconn once that deal started to, it became clear that it was shady and was not going to work out. So I don't know, like, does this portend more bad deals where states win out because they provide bigger dollar amounts and fewer stipulations? Like, and is that where we want to go as we go down this path of like increasingly outsized and kind of crazy economic development incentives? I mean, you know, I think anyone who watches this podcast know that I personally find some of these deals to be a little bit suspect, and I don't know how well they work out in the end.
Right.
But I think that these states get really overzealous, especially when it's a competitive environment and they're trying to compete for these jobs. But the numbers that are going out these days on these packages and the lack of checks and balances, I think in this one specifically, is a little bit concerning to me.
Well, and you're right, the job requirement, it didn't Foxconn didn't go away, but they were allowed to renegotiate the deal. If you're going to promise a $4 billion factory and 4,000 workers, I feel like you could put a safety net of 500 on there or something. When you look at the equation that is standard, it's, all right, this much capital investment, this many jobs equals we pay this much, and then they break it down to how much they're paying per job over the course of, you know, however many years. I do like that, you know, they have to stay for 15 years, but likely what's going to happen is they'll wind up paying these incentives, and, you know, so what, after 15, they'll pay the incentives for 15 years, and then if they don't make good on the deal after 15 years, the state's going to asks Panasonic to pay him back.
I don't think there's a clawback in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that would just be them hitting the mark. So.
Oh, okay. But I mean, they have to be paying those incentives before they hit the 15-year mark.
Oh, yeah. So my point, is that they could. I mean, I don't think this is their plan to like build $1 billion factory and operate an empty building for 15 years.
Right.
Like, obviously, that's not what anyone wants.
Right.
I'm just saying that like there are some risks inherent in this deal that I feel like it could have been better structured.
Yeah, Jeff, the magic beans just they keep
The beans.
They keep sprouting.
Yeah.
There is way too much ready, fire, aim type stuff going on with these. I would agree. I think we have that Foxconn shaded glasses that we're looking at with this stuff, so we're more suspect and more critical of these deals, but it's fair. And I think when you look at the job guarantees, you would like to see something. I think what I would like to see is not just a number of jobs. I want to see jobs paying no less than
salary. Yeah,
okay,
that's
so you can't do the broom pushing intern guy. Okay,
Yeah.
you need to make sure that if you're creating jobs, whatever the number is, there's a minimum number, and they're paying at least this much. I think that's what's needed here. I think there may have been a little bit more comfort with being loose because Panasonic is a sort of consumer-facing brand as well. In this case, that's not what they're doing. They're not building consumer electronics or batteries or anything. Well, it's like EV batteries, but it's not for consumer devices. So there's probably a little bit more comfort there because if they do back out, they could see more backlash just
hurt the brand.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point. Whereas a Foxconn, it's kind of tied to Apple, but only for those in the know.
Yeah.
But you're right. That's another stipulation that's also very common in these is that they have to hit a job number with a certain salary over a certain amount of time and even with certain benefits. So, I mean, and then a lot of that, states will also kick in training costs, stuff like that, upskilling employees. So it is weird. It's a really weird deal. This deal's an onion.
And Panasonic's, a lot of layers. Yeah.
The beans produced an onion.
The beans are onions, guys.
Wow.
It's just canned onion.
Oh, man.
That is deep.
Gross.
I like our simultaneous gross. All right. My In Case You Missed It this week was awesome because I picked this story came out on like Monday. We posted it, and as soon as I read the story, I'm like, that is my In Case You Missed It. Boom, pasted it in the document. And right after I did that, a listener of the podcast, William Brent, emailed me the exact same story and said, this looks like something that'd be right up your alley. I'm like, you have no idea what just happened. Like, he was blowing my mind. I'm trying to tell everybody in the office, and they're like, neat.
Man, you must punch something there.
I know. I'm so fired up. Anyway, so my In Case You Missed It, via William Brent, thank you. Rice engineers are turning dead spiders into hydraulic grippers. Rice University mechanical engineers have found a way to convert the bodies of dead wolf spiders into necrobotic grippers. That's right, that's a new gripper called a necrobotic gripper. Doom and gloom. All right. In a recent study, researchers used a gripper, aka a dead spider, to lift a jumper and break a circuit on an electronic breadboard, turning off an LED. According to the researchers, the spider, after it's dead, is the perfect architecture for small-scale, naturally derived grippers. The lab specializes in soft robotic systems that use non-traditional materials. The spiders can lift more than 130% of their own body weight, and sometimes much more. Now, this one was a little shady because I didn't know if it was like a post-mortem body weight or like a living body weight. Because I mean, that's gonna be a big difference.
A little shrinking, shrinking
you know?
spider,
It all started when this team found a dead spider in the hallway and wondered, why do spiders curl up when they die? Which is crazy. Basically, spiders use hydraulics to power their muscles, and when they die, they curl up. So, the team wanted to find a way to leverage that mechanism. They glued a needle to the dead spider's head, injected a little air into it, and voila, natural gripper. The spider was built to last and went through 1,000 open-close cycles. And that's after it lived a full spider life. Now, they say this could be useful in pick-and-place applications, and bonus, they're biodegradable. No more waste out there. Okay. This story is incredible. The prospect of necrobotic rippers is a little terrifying. Luckily, as humans, we don't have hydraulic muscles, so luckily we won't have air pumped into our brains to use us once we're dead. But you never know.
I don't know, your robot overlords might figure out a way.
They will.
You're on their team, so it doesn't really matter.
I mean, when they're already growing you in the pods,
yeah.
I mean, I feel like they're going to do the right thing. They will.
You're just getting as much on record as you can, huh?
I mean, that's fine.
Yeah.
Hold on. We're talking into the internet, right? Dear robot, dear AI master, overlord. I always thought you made a superior burger and fries. Did either of you guys get a chance to read this story, and what are your thoughts on leveraging dead spider tech?
I did read it. I thought it was fascinating.
Yeah.
Really, just even the minds of these researchers to look at that and think, what can we do with that?
That's so amazing, yeah.
And I always wonder, too, why do spiders curl up like that? So that was kind of interesting to learn. As far as applications, it'll be interesting to see where they go with this. But yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, you've covered all the different stuff involved with it. There's not really much more to bring out there, but yeah, amazing development. Yeah. And spiders, really, I mean, we've looked at all the stuff they're doing with different spider silks, too, in terms of materials. So really kind of amazing creatures. No,
I'm constantly fascinated, and I cover a lot of stories with bioengineering, right? Nature-inspired engineering. I never thought it would be dead nature engineering, or just using dead nature. But I mean, it's way better than just sweeping it up and tossing it in the wastebasket.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I'm not comfortable with the fact that we already have a word, necrobotic, for dead things robots, because
it's called like Second Life spiders or something.
No,
I mean,
New Life, the New Life spider.
Yeah.
Or like, can't this just be like a one-off thing? Do we need a word for it to like enable future dead things robots?
Oh man, think of all the kids listening to this right now that could be like, you know what I'm going to major in? Necrobotics.
Necrobotics. It's a new thing.
Red flag those kids.
Your university already has a program in place.
I think part of it is they needed a term because it was published in a journal, and so they had to be a new breakthrough in necrobotics. I mean, if that is the headline, you've got me. Just, I will buy the journal. How much for that article?
Yeah.
And then I read it and I'm like, sad future coming. Sad future.
Yeah, well, you wanted this future, so enjoy your trip to McDonald's when a dead spider is like flipping your burger.
Grippers, bringing out your Happy Meals.
If a dead spider can make sure the twists are in the bag, and actually given their very soft touch, they probably won't break them either. You know what? I like this. Taco Bell.
Yeah.
Get in the necrobotic game.
Yeah, you got a complaint? Take it up with my manager. He's a dead spider.
Man, the conversations I'll have with a dead wolf spider. Jeff, what is your in case you missed it this week?
All right. Might be opening a real can of worms over here on this one, so we'll see. My story is about North Dakota basically wanting to do a new security review for a Chinese firm that is opening up a new corn mill. So basically, about a year ago, this company, Fufeng Group, they're from China, or basically it's Fufeng USA. It's the U.S. subsidiary of a company that is owned, or a Chinese company and the Chinese government does own part of this company, okay, but not the U.S. subsidiary. They are planning a $700 million wet corn milling plant in just outside Bismarck, North Dakota. Okay, so initially there were some concerns because there was going to be about $96 million worth of infrastructure investment. People were cool with that. There was about a 20-year deal in terms of tax abatements. They were cool with that. But once they started digging into this company and a lot of the locals learned that it was a Chinese company that owned it, this concern was the fact that this facility, which is about 370 acres in an agribusiness park, was also about 15 miles away from a U.S. Air Force base.
Right.
So they're worried that somehow this food processing plant could essentially be there for no other reason than to steal secrets from this Air Force base, which does do a lot of unmanned missions. So there is some sort of high-tech stuff going on at this local Air Force base. But that's the reason that there's all this local backlash now for this facility that could employ like 200 people. It's a $700 million investment they're looking to make to get this plant up and going. It's basically to process corn. They talked to the guy who runs the U.S. subsidiary. He said, we're going to buy corn here in the U.S. We're going to make everything here in the U.S. and we're going to sell everything here in the U.S. It is a U.S. subsidiary of a Chinese company. They have no contact with the Chinese government. The FBI has vetted the company and basically said, yeah, I think it's just a corn mill.
Yeah.
But there is still all of these folks in this area, and now it has kicked it up the ladder. There's a letter sent to a number of senators. The 2 North Dakota senators, Marco Rubio is involved because it's a Chinese company. And all of this is going on, even though the local officials are like, it all sort of checks out.
Yeah.
Like, we feel pretty good about this. There's another Chinese company, an aerospace company, probably about an hour's drive away, that started working in the state, I don't know, like 10 years ago. They've grown and done stuff, and it's an aerospace company.
Yeah. If anyone's
And there hasn't been any issues there. There's also a flight school not too far away from this where they have trained Chinese pilots. So there's all of this stuff. But what's holding up this $700 million, 200-job corn mill project is fears over security because it's a Chinese company. So it just goes back to a lot of the stuff that was really started with, it's Huawei, right? I always say that name incorrectly. Huawei.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, my bad.
No worries.
That started there with the Trump administration being very concerned over the consumer electronics, and they're tied to the Chinese government and potential issues there. We talked last week about that GPS connector is made by a Chinese company and security concerns there. So how much is this going to play a role going forward? If it's a Chinese company that wants to, and we want these folks to come here, right? We want them to make things here in the U.S., but we're still paranoid over the fact that it's a Chinese company and it's causing problems.
You know what food processing doesn't need right now? Another conspiracy theory. Food processing has been suffering as a result of some coincidental things that we have talked about as normal things that happen doing business, that have all been, everyone else that is a stakeholder in the industry says, no, it's all normal. But as a result of fanning the flames of conspiracy theories, I think is why we get stuff like this.
Well, and the thing is, so I called it a food processing plant, which it is, but basically it makes, I guess you could call it like a binder that goes into a number of different food products. It goes into pharmaceuticals. It's used in a number of different industries. It's basically like a thickener, if you will. So the theory isn't even worrying like they're going to poison us. It's the fact that the proximity, again, to this Air Force base. It just seems like a reach, especially after the FBI has been in there and seems to have vetted the company. And again, the guy running the show here is out of Chicago.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you want to go after a Chinese company, if you have the energy for it, why not TikTok? You want to talk about something with real vulnerabilities and harvesting information on its users? Maybe spend your time on that one.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm caught here, because there are definitely some of these companies we have to be careful with. Yeah. We talked about one last week, and who?
Huawei.
I don't know why I keep messing that one up. Some of that seemed legit. I think it was a little bit overzealous at times, but there were legitimate concerns there. But again, we're going to start limiting our opportunities if we start getting this paranoid over all these companies. I mean, we want to compete with China on a global level. Well, hey, if a Chinese company wants to come here and help us out a little bit with that, we also have to be open to that.
Right.
So.
I wonder how many of the loudest people are employed. Anna, your thoughts on... I wasn't very familiar with this article. What are your thoughts on the potential security risks presented by this milling plant?
I agree with all that you guys have said pretty much. It's just, it seems like a colossal waste of time and just sort of, I don't know if grandstanding is the right word, but it just seems like not necessary.
Yeah. Well, of all the reasons to put a mill on hold, again, $96 million in infrastructure, tax abatements that we were just talking about, potential environmental concerns, more traffic in this area, all of that, that's viable.
Yeah.
Well, this one seems like kind of a reach. I don't know.
I know, and if people want to get serious, like, we all buy products produced in China every day. Yeah. We all provide, to your point about social media, like, information is getting out there. These GPS devices, IT devices, that's the kind of stuff that you need to be more worried about, in my opinion. Like, people don't blink an eye about country of origin when they buy at a retailer. They're not even thinking about that. And then suddenly we've got a problem with a wet corn plant 15 miles away from an airport force base. Like, that's not even close. That just
and it's been there for a while. And again, they are running probably some, secretive type stuff because they're unmanned planes, but I don't know. Like, it's a big swing.
I agree. I think it's a bit of a reach.
I just hope that this story dies here and we don't see it in the next political cycle.
That's part of the problem, though, right?
You stood for the Chinese factory. It's like, oh, come on.
Well, that's the problem. Like, the Republican governor in North Dakota was initially like, hey, this is great stuff.
Jobs.
Then everybody started raising this issue, and as soon as you say China and security and intelligence concerns, then he's got to backpedal.
Oh, boy. Well, on our previous story, we got another gem from Mark Waterman, who suggested necrobotic burrito prep.
Totally. That's what's coming for David's burrito.
Yeah, but it's like, how are the robots going to lick the end of the burrito to seal it?
Oh, does anyone lick the end of it?
Only the good ones.
Chipotle?
Only the good ones.
Yeah, I don't think Chipotle's licking burritos, bro.
I mean, I got a guy.
Not
He makes sure my burritos stick. And Mark, actually, producer Alex says that not only is your idea solid, but necrobotic burrito prep is a sick band name. That's from Alex, and also likely his next venture in the arts. All right. Well, let's move on to our final thoughts before we get out of here. Anna, what's your final thought this week?
Okay, so I just wanted to let you guys know that this might be my final week on the podcast because I learned this morning that my husband bought a Mega Millions ticket.
I was so afraid for a second. Oh, God. My heart is racing. I'm like, we don't even know what we're going to do. Anyway, go ahead. No.
I have nothing else to do. So I think like by the time this reaches you Monday, if you are getting this podcast in your Monday email deployment or online, I'll know by then. Yeah. And I feel like my odds are pretty good. They're good, right? Like my odds are good?
I think it's 1 in 302 million.
Yeah, so I feel good about that.
Easy.
I'm worried if Anna wins, like we're going to find out exactly what she thinks of all of us.
When we don't hear from her again, I think we'll know. No.
I'm going to bring in burritos, and then after you guys eat them, I'll be like, I licked all those closed.
And I'd say, thank you.
See ya.
That's why it's stuck. Yeah. You know what? When you go to, like, you're trying to eat the burrito the size of your head, and it blasts open on the back end, you're just like, no one licked this burrito. Sad.
I don't even want that much money, honestly. Like, I can't even imagine like what that.
Oh, but that
kind of turns my stomach.
That is the whole fun part. That's my final thought. Is that I love getting caught up in it. You see the dollars, you see the odds, and you're just like, you go straight Dumb and Dumber, like you're saying there's a chance. And
no, I think Anna had the best line. Like, you don't care when it's a measly like 15 million. Like, why would you bother then?
Right, don't bother. But now it's a billion. Oh, then I'll buy a ticket. Okay. Yeah.
It's and no matter, I'm the type of person that buys a ticket just like only when it gets ridiculous because I like to get caught up. I like to get caught up in the fanfare. And I know that our coworker Mitzi, he was planning on doing a pool, the whole office throw in a couple bucks to get a bunch of tickets. And it was just fun thinking through like, man, how would that tear us apart?
Yeah,
just like, boy, I bought the ticket, so I should really get 10% more. It's like we're talking about hundreds of millions each.
You never paid me for those, so you're out.
But I do like... And I'm glad that I just have another chance because on Tuesday, I was doing my walk around the building and I wanted to go to the gas station and buy the tickets. I'm like, no, there's time. But then life happens. All of a sudden, I'm at softball and they're calling the numbers.
Panic.
And
I had those. Those were my numbers.
One of the 5 numbers was mine. So I knew that I'm close.
Was it the Powerball or whatever? Because I think that one paid.
Oh, no. It was just a 7. Just a run of the mill
Miscellaneous 7.
Yeah, it was just my wife's July birthday 7. But yeah, I mean, you have to. That's another thing I enjoy is like the people just go and they do the quick pick. I like to just sit there with the little fill in. You got to fill the circles in.
I've never bought a lottery ticket.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to even do it.
It's like the old school Scantron sheets, and you just like fill in the numbers, and you're just thinking like, I want to do Dez's birthday, but then if I do, I got to do Caden's birthday. Do I do my dad's birthday? No.
So there's like a line behind you, and you're doing that.
No. Like people grab the little sheets, and then they go off into there's no
way to see. It's kind of like.
Yeah, right.
You don't want anyone copying. But no, there's normally like a designated area. People normally take them home because it takes a lot of thought. They got to open like random pages of a book and pick those numbers. But I'm on board. Jeff, you plan to win tonight?
Like, Anna, I don't think I've ever bought one of those. Those types of tickets. So maybe. Maybe I should. Maybe I got to get on.
Today's the day.
Yeah. I mean, that's
what would happen. What would happen if Anna and I both win?
And we have to split it.
We're out of here.
And then David has to do the podcast alone.
I would support your decisions and then understand that you likely wouldn't listen anymore and trash you mercilessly. No, I'm just joking. I would actually probably.
Doesn't sound like it.
Feels like you had this planned out.
No. I would just, wish you good luck in future ventures and hope that you stuck around out of boredom after you spent the first $200 million. Like, I came back.
I'm back.
I bought everything.
I would be the most boring billionaire.
Same, I know. Well.
I don't know.
I would be a fun billionaire. That would be gone like fire. Just like
you would have every action figure ever made.
Oh man, before the state or whatever cut me the giant check, it'd be gone. Just like I got $602 million in cash coming. Let's roll. Anyway,
that would be frightening.
Jeff, final thoughts?
A couple things here. First of all, we'll get the answer out. Nobody got the trivia question correct.
Really?
Yes. Everybody was betting on somebody else. The answer to the company in the last year that has had the most engagement due to their recalls, again, the options were General Motors, General Mills, Sun Villa, Ford, Tyson. And the number one answer, or number one in terms of engagement, was actually General Motors. They had a huge recall on their Bolt with some battery issues starting on fire, and actually they also with their Silverado and some old SUVs. So it was a bit of a quantity thing there. So the correct answer was General Motors, and had a lot of people going with Tyson, a lot of people going with Ford.
Yeah,
but General Motors.
I was all in with Tyson. I really thought that was it.
Yeah. So I'm going to pause the trivia portion.
Oh.
Okay. I'm going to revamp this. I've got some ideas. I just need to work it through a little bit. So we're going to skip it this week. I'll be back shortly with that.
So the trivia this week is: will Jeff come back with a short answer version of trivia, a multiple choice, or true and false? No.
Oh no. It's going to be much. Well, it'll be one of those.
Whoa. Yeah, what is it going to be?
It'll be something like that. I mean, I don't know what other options are. My closing thought was actually one of the nerdiest things that I enjoy is Shark Week.
Oh, yeah.
On the Discovery Channel.
All week at my house. Oh, my God.
I didn't get a chance to watch a lot of it because we were playing softball and stuff like that and stuff going on, but I definitely recorded all of it, DVR'd it all, so I will be enjoying that. And one of the things that's actually pretty cool is a lot of the technology they use. The shows that I don't like the shows where they have like the guys from Jackass on there and that kind of stuff. I don't get into that. What I like is when they're talking about like tracking them and figuring out what they're doing and where they're going and all this crazy stuff. And a lot of that technology you can see coming from the industrial sector. Like it's got to be super durable. It's got to put up with a lot of different environmental factors. They also get into the environments that these sharks are in and what's going on affecting them. So a lot of the stuff that we talk about, you can definitely see a correlation to, and it's I don't know, it's kind of cool to see as well. So. We do have one trivia question, though. There is a person/company we have not mentioned the entire time on this podcast, I think for the first time ever. If you can say who that is, we will send you a T-shirt.
That's an easy one. Everyone knows.
Yes. So let's get some T-shirts out there. I think they should know.
Like coming clean about never buying a lottery ticket. I don't know that I've ever watched Shark Week.
See, the stuff, especially like when they have the ones on like Air Jaws where they're jumping out of the way. I don't know. There's something about that. It's just engrossing.
It is good. There's this really big plug by Sonic. Have you seen the commercials for this slushy that's got like shark gummies on the top?
Oh, no.
Like every minute of the break is about this slushy. So
I didn't know if it was the restaurant or the hedgehog. All right. Well, before we get out of here on such a poignant note, Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. Finally, I think Mark just scored a shirt.
He did.
Mark is quick. All right. Finally, if you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at in.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily and weekly newsletters. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first, and subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine, and make sure that you can watch us live. All right. For Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells, I'm David Manti. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast, and we'll see you next week.